let's continue with the final part of The Count of Monte Cristo. Chapter 114. Peppino. At the very same moment as the Count's steamship was vanishing behind the Cap Morgiou, a man, travelling by the mail on the road from Florence to Rome, had just left the little town of Acquapendente. Doing some of the journey on foot, he covered a lot of ground without attracting suspicion. Dressed in a frock coat, or rather an overcoat, much worn by travel but showing the ribbon of the Legion of Honour sewn onto it still bright and shining, the man was recognisably French, not only by his dress and his decoration, but also by the accent in which he addressed the postilion. Another proof that he had been born in that land, with its universal language, was that he knew no other Italian words except those pertaining to music, which, like Figaro's Goddam, can stand in for all the subtleties of a particular tongue. "Allegro!" he cried to the coachman as they went up a hill. "Moderato!" he cried every time they went down. God knows there are plenty of hills up and down between Florence and Rome along the road through Acquapendente. The two words, of course, caused enormous hilarity among the good fellows to whom they were addressed. Once in the presence of the Eternal City, that is to say, on arriving at La Storta, the point from which one may catch sight of Rome, the traveller did not experience the feeling of fervent curiosity that impels every foreigner to rise from his seat in an attempt to see the famous dome of St. Peter's, which can be glimpsed long before anything else. No, he merely took a portfolio from his pocket, and from the portfolio a piece of paper folded 4 times, which he unfolded and refolded with an intensity that was close to respect, saying only, "Good, I still have it." The carriage entered through the Porta del Popolo, turned left, and stopped at the Hôtel de Londres. Our old friend Signor Pastrini greeted the traveller on the doorstep, cap in hand. The traveller got down, ordered a good dinner, and asked for the address of the firm of Thompson and French, which was instantly pointed out to him, since the firm was one of the best known in Rome. It was situated in the Via de' Bianchi, near St. Peter's. In Rome, as anywhere else, the arrival of a stagecoach is an event. 10 young descendants of Marius and the Gracchi, barefoot and with holes at their elbows but with one hand on their hip and the other arm picturesquely bent above their head, watched the traveller, the post-chaise and the horses. These typical Roman ragazzi had been joined by some 50 idlers from the Papal States, of the sort who make rings on the water by spitting into the Tiber from the Ponte Sant'Angelo when there is water in the river. Now, since the ragazzi and street urchins of Rome, unlike the gamins of Paris, understand every language, especially French, they heard the traveller ask for rooms, order dinner, and finally inquire as to the address of Thompson and French. The result was that, when the new arrival came out of the hotel with his inevitable guide, a man emerged from the group of onlookers, and, without being observed by the traveller, or apparently by the guide, walked a short distance behind the foreigner, tailing him with as much skill as a Parisian detective. The man was in such a hurry to visit Thompson and French that he had not bothered to wait for the horses to be harnessed. The carriage was to pick him up on the way, or wait for him at the door of the bank. He got there before the coach reached him. The Frenchman went in, leaving his guide in the antechamber, where he immediately got into conversation with 2 or 3 of those businessmen who have no business, or, if you prefer, have 1,000 businesses, who in Rome hang around at the doors of banks, churches, ruins, museums, or theatres. At the same moment, the man who had left the group of onlookers at the hotel also went in. The Frenchman rang at the window in the front office and came through into the first room. His shadow did likewise. "Messrs. Thompson and French?" the foreigner asked. A sort of lackey got up at a sign from a confidential clerk, the solemn guardian of the first office. "Whom should I announce?" asked the lackey, preparing to precede the foreigner. "Baron Danglars," the traveller replied. "Follow me," said the lackey. A door opened. The lackey and the baron vanished through it. The man who had come in behind Danglars sat down on a bench to wait. The clerk went on writing for roughly 5 minutes. During this time, the seated man remained absolutely still and silent. Then the clerk's quill stopped scratching across the paper. He looked up, searched carefully all around him, and, after reassuring himself that they were alone, said, "Ah, so there you are, Peppino." "Yes," the man replied laconically. "Did you see the chance of anything good from that fat man?" "There's not much to be had out of him. We've been informed." "So you know what he's here for, snooper?" "Why, he's come to make a withdrawal. The only thing is we don't know how much." "You'll find out soon enough, my friend." "Good, but don't do as you did the other day and give me misinformation." "What do you mean? What are you thinking of? Is it the Englishman who went away with 3,000 écus a few days ago?" "No, he really did have 3,000 écus when we found them. I'm talking about that Russian prince." "What of him?" "Well, you told us 30,000 livres, and we only found 22. You probably didn't look hard enough." "Luigi Vampa did the search in person." "In that case, either he had paid his debts—" "A Russian? Or spent the money?" "I suppose that's possible." "It's definite. But let me go to my post, or the Frenchman will have done his business before I can discover the precise amount." Peppino nodded, and, taking a rosary out of his pocket, began to mutter some prayer or other, while the clerk vanished through the same door that had opened for the lackey and the baron. 10 minutes later he reappeared, with a broad smile. "Well?" Peppino asked. "Stand by, it's a princely sum." 5 or 6 millions, I believe." "Yes. How do you know the figure?" "Against a bill signed by His Excellency the Count of Monte Cristo." "You know the Count?" "Credited on Rome, Venice, and Vienna." "Just so," the clerk exclaimed. "How are you so well informed?" "I told you that we had advance information." "So why did you come to me?" "To be sure that this really is our man." "It's him, all right. 5 million. A fine sum, eh, Peppino?" "Yes." "We'll never have as much for ourselves." At least we'll get some crumbs of it," Peppino said philosophically. "Hush, here he comes." The clerk took up his pen and Peppino his rosary. When the door opened, the one was writing and the other praying. Danglars appeared in fine spirits, together with the banker who accompanied him to the door. As agreed, the carriage that was to meet Danglars was waiting in front of the house of Thompson and French. The guide held the door open. A cicerone is a very accommodating creature who can be put to all sorts of uses. Danglars leapt into the carriage with the spring of a 20-year-old. The guide shut the door and got up beside the driver. Peppino climbed onto the rear box. "Would your Excellency like to see St. Peter's?" the guide asked. "What for?" the baron replied. "Why, just to see it." "I didn't come to Rome to see anything," Danglars said aloud. Then, with an avaricious smile, he said under his breath, "I came to touch." And he meaningfully touched his portfolio, in which he had just enclosed a letter. "So your Excellency is going—" "To the hotel." "Casa Pistrini," the guide said to the coachman, and the carriage set off as briskly as a racing gig. 10 minutes later, the Baron had returned to his rooms, and Peppino had taken up his place on the bench running along the front of the hotel, after whispering a few words to one of those descendants of Marius and the Gracchi whom we noted at the start of this chapter, the boy in question setting off down the road for the capital as fast as his legs could carry him. Danglars was weary, satisfied, and sleepy. He went to bed, put his pocketbook under the bolster, and fell asleep. Peppino had plenty of time, however. He played morra with some porters, lost 3 écus, and in consolation drank a flagon of Orvieto. The next day, Danglars woke late, even though he had gone to bed early. For the previous 5 or 6 nights he had slept badly, if at all. He had an ample breakfast, and not being, as he had said, much inclined to enjoy the beauty of the Eternal City, he asked for his post-horses to be brought at noon. However, Danglars had not counted on the formalities of the police and the idleness of the postmaster. The horses arrived only at 2 o'clock, and the guide did not bring back the passport with its visa until 3. All these preparations had drawn a fair crowd of onlookers to the door of Signor Pastrini's, and there was no lack of descendants of the Gracchi and Marius among them. The Baron walked in triumph through these groups of idlers who called him Excellency to get the baiocco. Danglars, who was a very democratic fellow, as we know, had up to then been content to be addressed as Baron, and had not yet been called Excellency. He found the title flattering, and threw a few pulls to the mob, which was quite ready for a further dozen of us or so of the same, to nominate him Your Royal Highness. "What road?" the postilion asked in Italian. "To Ancona," the Baron replied. Signor Pastrini translated the request and the reply, and the carriage set off at a gallop. Danglars intended to go to Venice and draw out part of his fortune, then from Venice to Vienna, where he would withdraw the rest. Then his idea was to settle in the latter city, which, he had been assured, was one offering many pleasures. Hardly had they done 3 leagues through the Roman Campagna than night began to fall. Danglars had not realized that they were leaving so late, otherwise he would have stayed in Rome. He asked the postilion how long it would be before they arrived in the next town. "Non capisco," the man replied. Danglars nodded to indicate, "Very good," and the carriage drove on. "I can stop at the first post," Danglars thought. He still felt some traces of that well-being which he had experienced on the previous day and which had given him such a good night's sleep. He was comfortably installed in a solid English coach with double springs. He felt himself being pulled forward at a gallop by 2 strong horses, and he knew that the relay was 7 leagues on. What is one to do when one is a banker and one has successfully gone bankrupt? For 10 minutes he thought of his wife, who was still in Paris, and for another 10 minutes he considered his daughter, who was running round the globe with Mademoiselle d'Armilly. He devoted a further 10 minutes to his creditors and how he would spend their money. Then, having nothing left to think about, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. From time to time, however, shaken by a jolt which was harder than the rest, Danglars would momentarily reopen his eyes and feel himself carried along at the same speed through the same Roman Campagna, among a scattering of broken aqueducts which looked like granite giants petrified as they ran. But the night was cold, dark, and rainy, and it was far better for a man who was half asleep to stay at the back of the coach, with his eyes closed, than to put his head out of the door and ask where he was, from a postilion whose only answer would be "Non capisco." So Danglars went on sleeping, thinking that it would be time enough to wake up when they arrived at the relay. The carriage stopped. Danglars thought he had at last reached his much-desired goal. He opened his eyes and looked through the glass, expecting to find himself in the middle of some town, or at least of some village. But he could see nothing except a kind of isolated hovel, with 3 or 4 men coming and going like shadows. He waited for a moment, expecting the postilion who had finished his relay to come and ask him for his pay. He thought he could take advantage of the opportunity to ask for some information from his new driver. But the horses were unharnessed and replaced without anyone coming to ask the traveller for money. Astonished, Danglars opened the door, but a firm hand immediately slammed it shut, and the carriage set off again. The Baron woke up completely at this, and in some astonishment. "Hey!" he called to the postilion. "Hey, mio caro!" This was more bel canto Italian than he had learnt when his daughter was... This was more bel canto Italian that he had learnt when his daughter used to sing duos with Prince Cavalcanti, but mio caro did not reply. So Danglars opened the window. "I say, my good friend, where are we going?" he said, putting his head out. "Dentro la testa!" cried a serious and commanding voice, accompanied by a threatening gesture. Danglars understood dentro la testa, put your head in. As we can see, he was making rapid progress in Italian. He obeyed, but with some misgivings. And since his anxiety was increasing minute by minute, after a few moments his mind, instead of the void that it had contained on setting out, which had brought sleep, his mind, as we say, filled with a large quantity of thoughts, each more likely than the previous one to keep a traveller on his toes, especially one finding himself in Danglars' situation. In the darkness, his eyes took on that degree of acuity that strong emotions tend to give them at first, only for the effect to be reversed later through overuse. Before one is afraid, one sees clearly. While one is afraid, one sees double, and after being afraid, one sees dimly. Danglars saw a man wrapped in a cloak galloping beside the right-hand door. "Some gendarme," he said. "Have I been denounced to the pontifical authorities by the French telegraph?" He decided to resolve his uncertainties. "Where are you taking me?" he asked. "Dentro la testa," the same voice repeated in the same threatening tone. Danglars looked over at the left-hand door. Another man on horseback was galloping alongside it. "Definitely," said Danglars. "I have definitely been arrested." And he slumped back into the seat, this time not to sleep, but to think. A moment later the moon rose. From the back of the carriage he looked out at the countryside and saw the huge aqueducts, stone phantoms which he had noticed in passing, but now, instead of being on his right, they were on the left. He realized that the carriage had turned around and that he was being taken back to Rome. "Oh, wretch that I am!" he muttered. "They must have obtained an order for my extradition." The carriage continued to dash forward at a terrifying speed. A dreadful hour went by, because every new indication that appeared proved beyond doubt that the fugitive was being taken back the way he had come. Finally, he saw a dark mass against which it seemed that the carriage was about to crash, but it turned aside and continued parallel to the dark shape, which was nothing other than the ring of ramparts encircling Rome. Oh, Danglars muttered. "We're not going into the city, so I am not being arrested after all. Good heavens, I've just thought, could it be—" His hair stood on end, because he recalled those interesting stories of Roman bandits which were taken with such a large pinch of salt in Paris. Albert de Morcerf had told some of them to Mademoiselle Danglars and Eugénie Madame Danglars and Eugénie, when it had been a matter of the young Viscount becoming the son-in-law of the first and the husband of the latter. "Perhaps they are thieves," he thought. Suddenly the carriage was running over something harder than a sanded roadway. Danglars ventured to look out on both sides of the road and saw oddly shaped monuments. Thinking about Morcerf's story, which was now coming back to him in every detail, he thought that he must be on the Appian Way. On the left of the carriage, in a sort of dip, could be seen a circular excavation. It was the Circus of Caracalla. At a word from the man who was galloping by the right-hand door, the carriage stopped. At the same time the left-hand door opened, and a voice ordered, "Scendi!" Danglars got down without further ado. He could still not yet speak Italian, but he was already understanding the language. More dead than alive, he looked around him. He was surrounded by 4 men, apart from the postilion. "Di qua," one of the 4 said, going down a little path from the Appian Way to the middle of the irregular mounds that break up the topography of the Roman Campagna. Danglars followed his guide without debate, and did not need to turn around to confirm that the other 3 men were following him. But it seemed to him that these men were stopping like sentries at more or less equal distances. After they had walked for some 10 minutes, in which Danglars did not exchange a single word with his guide, he found himself standing between a small hillock and a tall bush. 3 silent men standing around him formed a triangle, with himself at its centre. He tried to speak, but his tongue refused to obey. "Avanti," said the same sharp and commanding voice. This time Danglars doubly understood. He understood both by word and by gesture, because the man who was walking behind him pushed him forward so roughly that he nearly collided with his guide. The guide was our friend Peppino, who advanced into the high bushes along a winding track that only the ants and the lizards could have recognized as a pathway. Peppino stopped in front of a rock surmounted by a thick bush. This rock, half open like an eyelid, swallowed up the young man, who disappeared into it like a devil into the pit in one of our fairy tales. The voice and gestures of the man behind Danglars ordered him to do the same. There could be no further doubt. The French bankrupt was in the hands of Roman bandits. Danglars did as he was told, like a man caught between 2 frightful perils, made brave by fear. Despite his stomach, which was not built for wriggling through cracks in the Roman Campagna, he slipped in behind Peppino, and, letting himself drop with his eyes closed, he fell on his feet. As he did so, he reopened his eyes. The track was wide but dark. Peppino, making no effort to conceal himself now that he was at home, struck a flame from a tinderbox and lit a torch. 2 other men came down behind Danglars, taking up the rear, and, pushing Danglars if he ever happened to stop, drove him down a gentle slope to the centre of a sinister-looking crossroads. Here were white stone walls, hollowed out to make coffins, superimposed one above the other, which seemed like the deep black eyes of a skull. A sentry was tapping the barrel of his carbine against his left hand. "Friend or foe?" he asked. "Friend," said Peppino. "Where is the captain?" "There," the sentry said, indicating over his shoulder a sort of large room hollowed out of the rock, its light shining into the corridor through wide arched openings. "Good prey, Captain, good prey," Peppino said in Italian, seizing Danglars by the collar of his frock-coat and dragging him across an opening like a door, through which one could gain access to the room in which the captain appeared to have made his lodging. "Is this the man?" he asked, looking up from Plutarch's Life of Alexander, which he had been reading attentively. "That's him, Captain, that's him." "Very well. Show him to me." On this rather impertinent order, Peppino brought his torch so sharply up to Danglars' face that he leapt back, afraid of having his eyelashes burned. His face, pale and distraught, showed all the signs of frightful terror. "This man is tired," the captain said. "Let him be shown to his bed." "Oh," Danglars murmured, "this bed is probably one of the coffins around the walls, and that sleep is the sleep of death that one of the daggers I can see shining in the darkness will bring me." Indeed, in the black depths of the vast hall, rising off their beds of dry grass or wolf's skin, one could see the companions of the man whom Albert de Morcerf had found reading Caesar's commentaries, and whom Danglars found reading the life of Alexander. The banker emitted a dull groan and followed his guide. He did not try either to pray or to cry out. He was without strength, will, power, or feeling. He went because he was taken. He tripped against a step, and, realizing that there was a stairway in front of him, he bent down instinctively so as not to strike his head, and found himself in a cell cut out of the sheer rock. It was clean, if bare, and dry, even though situated in immeasurable depth below the surface of the ground. A bed of dry grass, covered with goatskins, was not standing, but spread out in a corner of this cell. Seeing it, Danglars thought he saw the glowing symbol of his salvation. "Oh, God be praised," he murmured. "It's a real bed." This was the second time in the last hour that he had called on the name of God, something that had not happened to him for 10 years. "Ecco," the guide said, and, pushing Danglars into the cell, he shut the door behind him. A bolt grated, and Danglars was a prisoner. In any case, even if there had been no lock, it would have taken St. Peter, guided by a heavenly angel, to pass through the midst of the garrison which guarded the catacombs of Saint Sebastian, camped around its leader, in whom the reader will surely have recognized the celebrated Luigi Vampa. Danglars had most certainly recognized the bandit, though he had not wanted to believe in the man's existence when Morcerf had tried to introduce him in France. He had recognized not only him, but also the cell in which Morcerf had been imprisoned, and which, in all probability, was a lodging reserved for foreigners. These memories, which, as it happened, Danglars recalled with some joy, brought back a feeling of calm. Since they had not killed him at once, the bandits did not intend to kill him at all. They had captured him in order to rob him, and since he had only a few louis on him, he would be ransomed. He recalled that Morcerf had been taxed at around 4,000 écus. As he considered himself a good deal more important than Morcerf, he mentally settled his own price at 8,000 écus, and 8,000 écus was equivalent to 48,000 livres. He would still be left with something in the region of 5,050,000 francs. With that, he could manage anywhere. So, feeling more or less sure that he would survive the adventure, especially since there was no case in which a man had ever been held for a ransom of 5,050,000 livres, Danglars lay down on his bed, and, after turning around 2 or 3 times, fell asleep, as easy in his mind as the hero whose story Luigi Vampa was reading. Chapter 115. Luigi Vampa's Bill of Fare. Every sleep, apart from the one that Danglars feared, ends with an awakening. Danglars woke up. For a Parisian who was accustomed to silk curtains, velvet hangings on the walls, and the scent that rises from wood whitening in the chimney-piece or is wafted back from a ceiling lined in satin, to wake up in a chalky stone grotto must be like a dream in the worst possible taste. As he touched the goatskin curtains, Danglars must have thought he was dreaming about the Samoyeds or the Lapps. But in such circumstances it is only a second before the most intractable doubt becomes certainty. Yes, he thought. Yes, I'm in the hands of the bandits about whom Albert de Morcerf was telling us. His first impulse was to breathe, to make sure that he was not wounded. This was something that he had come across in Don Quixote, not perhaps the only book he had read, but the only one of which he could remember something. "No," he said, "they have not killed me or wounded me, but they may perhaps have robbed me." He quickly felt in his pocket. It had not been touched. The 100 louis that he had put aside for his journey from Rome to Venice were still in his trouser pocket, and the pocket-book with the letter of credit for 5,050,000 francs was still in the pocket of his frock coat. "These are strange bandits," he thought, "to have left me my purse and my pocket-book. As I said yesterday when I went to bed, they will try to ransom me. Well, I still have my watch. Let's see what time it is." Danglars' watch, a masterpiece by Breguet which he had carefully wound up the previous day before setting out, sounded 5:30 in the morning. Without it, Danglars would have had no idea of the time, since there was no daylight in his cell. Should he ask the bandits to explain themselves? Should he wait patiently until they asked for him? The second alternative seemed the wiser, so Danglars waited. He waited until noon. Throughout this time, a sentry had been stationed at his door. At 8 in the morning, the guard was changed, and at this moment, Danglars felt a desire to find out who was guarding him. He had noticed that rays of light, lamplight, not daylight, were managing to make their way through the ill-fitting planks of the door. He went across to one of these openings just at the moment when the bandit took a few gulps of brandy, which, because of the leather bottle that contained it, exuded an odour that Danglars found quite repellent. "Ugh!" he exclaimed, retreating to the far corner of the cell. At noon, the man with the brandy was replaced by another operative. Danglars was curious to see his new keeper, so he once more crept over to the gap in the boards. The new man was an athletic bandit, a Goliath with large eyes, thick lips, a broken nose, and red hair which hung over his shoulders in twisted locks like vipers. "Oh my God," Danglars said, "this one is more like an ogre than a human being. In any case, I am old and quite gristly, a fat white, not good to eat." As we may see, Danglars still had enough wits about him to joke. At the same moment, as if to prove that he was no ogre, his guard sat down in front of the cell door, took a loaf of black bread out of his haversack with some onions and cheese, which he forthwith began to devour. "Devil take me," Danglars said, observing the bandit's dinner through the gaps in his door. "Devil take me if I can understand how anyone could eat such filth." He went and sat down on the goatskin, which reminded him of the smell of the first century's brandy. However, it was all very well for Danglars to think that, but the secrets of nature are beyond our understanding, and it may be that the crudest of victuals can address a tangible invitation in quite eloquent terms to a hungry stomach. Suddenly, Danglars felt that at this moment his was a bottomless pit. The man seemed less ugly, the bread less black, and the cheese less rancid. Finally, those raw onions, this repulsive foodstuff, began to evoke certain sauces Robert, certain dishes of boiled beef and onions which his cook had adapted to more refined palates when Danglars would tell him, "Monsieur Denisot, give us a spot of plain home cooking today." He got up and went to bang on the door. The bandit looked up. Danglars saw that he had been heard and banged louder. "Che cosa?" the bandit asked. I say, my good fellow," Danglars said, tapping his fingers against the door. "Isn't it about time someone thought of feeding me as well, eh?" But either because he did not understand, or because he had had no orders regarding Danglars' breakfast, the giant went back to his meal. Danglars' pride was wounded, and, not wishing to compromise himself any further with this brute, He lay down once more on the goatskin without uttering another word. 4 hours went by. The giant was replaced by another bandit. Danglars, who was suffering dreadful stomach cramps, quietly got up, put his eye to the door, and recognised the intelligent face of his guide. It was indeed Peppino, who was preparing to enjoy his guard duty in as much comfort as possible, sitting down opposite the door and placing between his legs an earthenware casserole which contained some chickpeas tossed in pork fat, hot and redolent. Beside these chickpeas, Peppino set down another pretty little basket of Velletri grapes and a flask of Orvieto wine. Peppino was something of a gourmet. Danglars' mouth began to water as he watched these gastronomic preparations. "Aha!" he thought. "Let's see if this one is any more amenable than the last." And he hammered gently on his door. "On y va," the bandit said. Thanks to his association with Signor Pastrini's house, he had eventually learned even idiomatic French, so he came and opened the door. Danglars recognised him as the man who had shouted at him in such an enraged tone, "Put your head in." However, this was no time for recriminations. On the contrary, he adopted his most pleasant manner and said with a gracious smile, "I beg your pardon, monsieur, but am I not also to be given some dinner?" "What?" Peppino exclaimed. "Is your Excellency hungry by any chance?" "I like that by any chance," Danglars thought. "It is now fully 24 hours since I last ate anything." And he added aloud, shrugging his shoulders, "Yes, I am hungry. In fact, very hungry." So would your Excellency like to eat? "Immediately, if possible." "Nothing simpler," said Peppino. "Here one can get whatever one wishes, if one pays, of course, as is customary among honest Christians." "Of course," said Danglars, "though the fact is that people who arrest you and throw you in jail should at least feed their prisoners." "Oh, Excellency," Peppino replied, "that's not customary." "That's no argument," Danglars said, hoping to tame his keeper with his good humour, "but I shall have to make do with it. Now then, let me have something to eat." "At once, Excellency. What is your pleasure?" And Peppino put his bowl on the ground so that the fumes found their way directly into Danglars' nostrils. "Give me your order." "Do you have kitchens here, then?" the banker asked. "What? Do we have kitchens? The finest kitchens." "And cooks?" "Superb cooks." "Well then, fowl, fish or flesh, anything, so long as I can eat." "As your Excellency pleases. Shall we say a chicken?" "Yes, a chicken." Peppino drew himself up and cried as loudly as he could, "A chicken for his Excellency." His voice was still echoing under the vaults when a young man appeared, handsome, slim, and half naked, like a fish porter in antiquity. He bore in the chicken on a silver plate, balancing it on his head. "This is just like the Café de Paris," Danglars muttered. "Here we are, Excellency," Peppino said, taking the chicken from the young bandit and putting it down on a worm-eaten table, which, with a stool and the goatskin bed, made up the entire furniture of the cell. Danglars asked for a knife and fork. "There you are, Excellency," Peppino said, offering him a little knife with a rounded end and a boxwood fork. Danglars took the knife in one hand and the fork in the other, and set to work cutting up the piece of poultry. "Excuse me, Excellency," Peppino said, putting a hand on the banker's shoulder. "Here we pay before eating. The customer may not be happy when he leaves." "Oh, I see," thought Danglars. "It's not like in Paris, quite apart from the fact that they are probably going to fleece me, but let's do things in style. Come now, I've always been told how cheap it is living in Italy. A chicken must be worth some 12 sous in Rome." "Here you are," he said, throwing a louis to Peppino. Peppino picked up the louis, and Danglars again put the knife on the bird. "One moment, Excellency," said Peppino, getting up. "Your Excellency still owes me something."
"Didn't I say they would fleece me?"
Danglars muttered, but resolving to make the best of this extortion, he asked,
"So how much do I still owe you for this skinny old boiler?"
"Your Excellency has given me a louis on account."
"A louis on account for a chicken?"
"Yes, indeed."
"Oh, come on, you're joking."
"That leaves only 4,999 louis that your Excellency still owes me." Danglars stared wide-eyed at the announcement of this enormous pleasantry.
"Oh, very funny," he muttered. "Very funny indeed."
He was about to go back to cutting up the chicken, but Peppino grasped his right hand with his own left hand while holding out the other. "Come," he said.
"You're not joking?"
Danglars asked. "We never joke, Excellency," said Peppino, as serious as a Quaker.
"What? 100,000 francs for this chicken?"
"Excellency, you wouldn't believe how hard it is to raise poultry in these confounded caves."
Come, said Danglars. "I find this very entertaining, very amusing, I must say, but as I'm hungry, let me eat. Here, there's another louis for yourself, my friend."
"Then that will be only 4,998 louis," Peppino said with unaltered equanimity. "If we are patient, we will get there in the end."
"Now, see here," said Danglars, disgusted by this persistent determination to make fun of him. "As far as that goes, never. Go to hell. You don't know the person you're dealing with."
Peppino made a sign, and the young boy reached out and snatched away the chicken. Danglars threw himself back on the goatskin bed, and Peppino shut the door, then went back to eating his chickpeas. Danglars could not see what Peppino was doing, but the clatter of the bandit's teeth left the prisoner in no doubt as to the nature of the exercise he was engaged in. It was quite clear that he was eating, and even that he was eating very noisily, like a badly brought-up young man.
"Brute,"
Danglars said. Peppino pretended not to hear. Without even turning around, he went on eating at a very sensible pace. Danglars' stomach seemed to have as many holes in it as the barrel of the Danaides. He couldn't believe that he would ever manage to fill it. However, he lasted for another half-hour, though it is true to say that that half-hour seemed to him like a century. Then he got up again and went to the door.
"Come, monsieur," he said, "don't keep me on tenterhooks like this any longer. Just tell me straight away what you want of me."
"But, Excellency, why not rather say what you want of us? Give us your orders and we shall carry them out."
"Well, first open the door."
Peppino opened it.
"I want," Danglars said. "By God, I want to eat."
"You're hungry?"
"As you very well know."
"What would your Excellency like to eat?"
"A piece of dry bread, since chicken is priceless in these accursed caves."
"Bread? Very well," said Peppino, and he called out, "Ho there, bring some bread." A young boy brought a roll. "There you are," said Peppino.
"How much?"
Danglars asked. 4,998 louis. You have 2 louis credit."
"What? A bread roll is 100,000 francs?"
100,000, said Peppino.
"But you asked me the same price for a chicken."
"We don't offer an à la carte menu, only a prix fixe. Whether you eat a lot or a little, ask for 10 dishes or just 1, it's still the same amount."
"This joke again, my good friend. I tell you, this is absurd, it's ridiculous. Why not tell me at once that you want me to die of starvation? It would be quicker."
"No, Excellency, you are the one who wants to commit suicide." Pay up and eat up.
What can I pay with, you frightful creature? Danglars said in exasperation. Do you think I carry 100,000 francs around in my pocket?
You have 5,050,000 francs in your pocket, Excellency, said Peppino. That is 100 chickens at 100,000 francs, and half a chicken at 50,000. Danglars shuddered, and the scales fell from his eyes. It was still a joke, but he understood it at last. It is even true to say that he found it more piquant than he had a moment before.
Come now, he said. If I give you those 100,000 francs, would you at least consider us quits and let me eat in peace?
Of course, said Peppino. But how can I give them to you? Danglars asked, breathing more freely. Nothing could be easier. You have a credit with Messrs. Thompson and French, via de Bianchi, in Rome. Give us a bill for 4,998 louis on those gentlemen, and our banker will cash it for us. Danglars at least wanted to show willing. He took the pen and paper which Peppino offered him, wrote out the order, and signed it.
There, he said. That's a bill, payable to bearer.
And that's your chicken. Danglars cut into the fowl with a sigh. It seemed to him very thin for such a large sum of money. As for Peppino, he read the paper carefully, put it in his pocket, and went on eating his chickpeas. And I think there we shall take a break. I enjoy how sassy that was. That was pretty great. Anyway, we shall take a break. Go do break-related things, and we shall see you back in about 5 minutes. Also, hello to... Did someone... Oh yeah, Andy. Hello, hope you are well. No need to apologise for being late. All is good. Yes, go do break things, and we will see you back in about 5 minutes. Bye for now. welcome back. I hope we're all doing well. I hope you've all had a nice break. I hope you've done break-related things, rotated fluids and such, and that everybody has some, I don't know, a hot beverage of some description, and a chair. Just a chair. That's all you need. I don't know why that was just the first thing that came into my head. Just have a chair. I have a cup of tea that I'm not going to even try and drink because it's way too hot, but I will drink it at some point. I hope you've all had a good break and are enjoying it thus far. I'm enjoying the sass. A bus seat works, right? Yeah, exactly. That'll be fine. Yeah, I'm very much enjoying the treatment Danglars getting here. It's great. So much sass. Just ran out of tea. Oh no, it was good. Good. That is a good thing. But running out is sad. But yeah, we have got not very far left to go. So I guess if we're all still sitting comfortably, let us continue. Chapter 16. No, chapter 116. The Pardon. The next day, Danglars was hungry again. The air of this cave was decidedly stimulating to the appetite, but the prisoner thought that today he would have no further expense. Being a thrifty man, he had hidden half of his chicken and a piece of his bread in the corner of the cell. But no sooner had he eaten them than he was thirsty. He had not thought of that. He struggled against his thirst until he felt his parched tongue sticking to his palate. Then, unable to resist the fire devouring him, he called out. The sentry opened the door. It was a new face. Danglars felt that it would be better to deal with a more familiar one, and called for Peppino. "Here I am, Excellency," the bandit said, arriving promptly, which seemed a good omen to the banker. "What would you like?" "Something to drink," the prisoner said. "Excellency, you know that wine is ridiculously expensive in the region around Rome." "Then give me water," said Danglars, trying to parry the blow. "Oh, Excellency, water is even scarcer than wine. The drought has been so bad." "I see," said Danglars. "It appears that we are going to start that again." Though he was smiling to give the impression that he was joking, the wretch felt sweat beading on his forehead. Now, friend," he continued, when Peppino made no response, "I'm asking you for a glass of wine. Will you refuse me?" "I've already told your Excellency that we don't sell retail or by the glass," said Peppino. "Very well. Give me a bottle." "Of which?" "The cheaper." "They are both the same price." "Which is?" 25,000 francs a bottle." "Tell me," said Danglars, with a bitterness that only Harpagon could have noted on the scale of the human voice, "tell me that you want to skin me alive. It would be quicker than devouring me piecemeal." "Perhaps that is what the master intends," said Peppino. "Who is the master?" "The one to whom you were taken the day before yesterday." "And where is he?" "Here." "Let me see him." "That's easy." A moment later, Luigi Vampa was standing in front of Danglars. "Did you call for me?" he asked his prisoner. "Are you the leader of those who brought me here, monsieur?" "Yes, Excellency." "What ransom do you want from me? Tell me." "Just the 5 million you have on you." Danglars felt a dreadful shudder run through his heart. "That is all I have in the world, monsieur," he said, "and the remains of a vast fortune." "If you take that away from me, take my life." "We have been forbidden to shed your blood, Excellency." "By whom?" "By the person whom we obey." "So you do obey somebody?" "Yes, a leader." "I thought that you yourself were the leader." "I am the leader of these men,
but another is my leader." "And does this leader obey anyone?"
"Yes."
"Whom?"
"God." Danglars thought for a moment.
"I don't understand," he said.
"Possibly."
"Did the leader tell you to treat me in this way?"
"Yes."
"Why?"
"I don't know."
"But my money will run out."
"Probably."
Come, said Danglars. "Would you like 1,000,000?
"No."
2?
"No."
3,000,000? 4? Come now, 4,000,000. I'll give it to you on condition you let me go."
"Why do you offer us 4,000,000 for something that is worth 5?" said Vampa. "That's usury, Signor Banker, if I'm not mistaken."
Take it all, I say," Danglars said, "and kill me."
Come, Excellency, calm yourself. You will whip up your blood, and that will give you an appetite to eat 1,000,000 a day. Be more economical, please."
"But when I have no more money to pay you," Danglars said in exasperation.
"Then you'll go hungry."
"Go hungry?" said Danglars, turning pale.
"Quite probably," said Vampa with admirable equanimity.
"But you said you did not wish to kill me."
"No."
"Yet you do want to let me starve to death."
"That's different."
"Well, you wretches," Danglars cried, "I shall foil your vile schemes. If I have to die, I should rather get it over at once. Make me suffer, torture me, kill me, but you shall not have my signature again."
"As you wish, Excellency," said Vampa, and he left the cell.
With a roar of frustration, Danglars threw himself down on his goatskin. Who were these men? Who was their invisible leader? What plan were they carrying out against him? And when everyone else was able to buy freedom, why could he not do the same? Oh, certainly death, sudden and violent, was a good way to foil his implacable enemies, who seemed to be pursuing him with some incomprehensible desire for vengeance. Yes, but that meant dying.
Perhaps for the first time in his long career, Danglars thought of death with a simultaneous desire and a fear of dying. The moment had come for him to look directly at the implacable spectre which hovers over every living creature, and which, at every heartbeat, says to itself, "You will die." Danglars was like one of those wild animals that at first are excited by the hunt, then are driven to desperation, and which sometimes, in their very desperation, manage to escape. It was of escape that Danglars was thinking. But the walls were solid rock, and in front of the only entrance to the cell a man was reading. Behind him could be seen the shapes of others with rifles, passing back and forth. His determination not to sign lasted for 2 days, after which he asked for food and offered 1,000,000. He was served a magnificent dinner, and they took his 1,000,000. From then on, the unfortunate prisoner's life was one of continual rambling. He had suffered so much that he no longer wished to expose himself to suffering, and he gave in to every demand. After 12 days, one afternoon when he had just eaten as he used to in the days when he had been rich, he did his accounts and discovered that he had signed so many bills to bearer that he had only 50,000 francs left. His reaction to this discovery was an odd one. Having just given up 5,000,000, he tried to save those last 50,000 francs. Rather than give up his 50,000 francs, he resolved to suffer a life of privation. He had glimmers of hope that were close to madness. Having long forgotten God, he recalled only that God had sometimes performed miracles, that the cave might collapse, that the pontifical Cabinieri might discover this accursed retreat and come to his aid, that then he would have 50,000 francs left, and that this was enough to prevent a man dying of hunger. He begged God to let him keep these 50,000 francs. and, as he prayed, he wept. 3 days passed in which the name of God was constantly, if not in his heart, at least on his lips. From time to time he had moments of delirium in which he thought he could see, through the window, a miserable room in which an old man lay, dying on a straw pallet. The old man, too, was dying of starvation. On the 4th day he was no longer a man but a living corpse. He had grubbed up from the earth the smallest crumb from his previous meals and began to devour the matting which covered the earth. Then he begged Peppino, as one might beg a guardian angel, to give him some food. He offered him 1,000 francs for a mouthful of bread, but Peppino did not answer. On the 5th day he dragged himself to the door of the cell. "Aren't you a Christian?" he said, hauling himself to his knees. "Do you wish to murder a man who is your brother before God? Oh, my former friends, he muttered, and he fell face down on the ground. Then, raising himself with a sort of despair, he cried, "The leader! The leader!" "Here I am," said Vampa, suddenly appearing. "What do you want now?" "Take the last of my gold," Danglars stammered, offering his pocketbook, "and let me live here in this cave. I am not asking for freedom, I am only asking to live." "So, are you really suffering?" Vampa asked. "Oh, yes, I am suffering cruelly." "But there are men who have suffered more than you have." "I cannot believe it." "It is so. Those who died of hunger." Danglars thought of the old man whom he had seen through the windows of his mean room in his hallucinations, groaning on his bed. He beat his forehead against the ground, moaning, "It's true, there are those who have suffered more than I do, but they at least were martyrs." "Do you at least repent?" asked a dark and solemn voice, which made the hair stand up on Danglars' head. His weakened eyes tried to make out things in the darkness, and behind the bandit he saw a man wrapped in a cloak and half hidden by the shadow of a stone pillar. "Of what must I repent?" Danglars stammered. "Of the evil you have done," said the same voice. "Oh, yes, I do repent, I do!" Danglars cried, and he beat his breast with his emaciated fist. "Then I pardon you," said the man, throwing aside his cloak and taking a step into the light. "The Count of Monte Cristo!" Danglars said, terror making him more pale than he had been a moment before from hunger and misery. "You are mistaken. I am not the Count of Monte Cristo." "Who are you, then?" "I am the one whom you sold, betrayed, and dishonoured. I am the one whose fiancée you prostituted. I am the one whom you trampled in order to attain a fortune. I am the one whose father you condemned to starvation, and the one who condemned you to starvation, but who none the less forgives you, because he himself needs forgiveness. I am Edmond Dantès." Danglars gave a single cry and fell prostrate. "Get up," said the Count. "Your life is safe. The same good fortune did not attend your 2 accomplices. One is mad, the other is dead. Keep your last 50,000 francs. I give them to you. As for the 5 million you stole from the almshouses, they have already been returned by an anonymous donor. Now, eat and drink. This evening you are my guest. Vampa, when this man has had his fill, he will be free." Danglars remained prostrate, while the Count walked away. When he looked up, he saw only a sort of shadow disappearing down the corridor, while the bandits bowed as it passed. As the Count had ordered, Vampa served Danglars. He brought him the best wine and finest fruits of Italy, and, having put him into his post-chaise, left him on the road with his back to a tree. He stayed there until dawn, not knowing where he was. When day broke, he found that he was near a stream. He was thirsty, so he dragged himself over to it. Leaning over the water to drink, he observed that his hair had turned grey. Chapter 117. October the 5th. It was around 6 in the evening, and light the colour of opal, pierced by the golden rays of the autumn sun, spread over a bluish sea. The heat of the day had gradually expired, and one was starting to feel that light breeze which seems like the breath of nature awakening after the burning midday siesta, that delicious breath that cools the Mediterranean coast and carries the scent of trees from shore to shore, mingled with the acrid scent of the sea. Over the huge lake that extends from Gibraltar to the Dardanelles and from Tunis to Venice, a light yacht, cleanly and elegantly shaped, was slipping through the first mists of evening. Its movement was that of a swan opening its wings to the wind and appearing to glide across the water. At once swift and graceful, it advanced, leaving behind a phosphorescent wake. Bit by bit, the sun, whose last rays we were describing, fell below the western horizon. But, as though confirming the brilliant fantasies of mythology, its prying flames reappeared at the crest of every wave, as if to reveal that the god of fire had just hidden his face in the bosom of Amphitrite, who tried in vain to hide her lover in the folds of her azure robe. Though there was apparently not enough wind to lift the ringlets on a girl's head, the yacht was travelling fast. Standing in its bow, a tall, bronzed man was staring wide-eyed at the dark, conical mass of land rising from the midst of the waves like a Catalan hat. "Is that Monte Cristo?" asked the traveller, who appeared to be in command of the yacht, in a grave and melancholy voice. "Yes, Excellency," said the master. "We are just reaching the end of our journey." "The end of our journey," the traveller muttered, with an indefinable note of dejection. Then he added under his breath, "Yes, this is port," and he relapsed into thoughts that expressed themselves in a smile sadder than tears. A few minutes later he saw an onshore light that was immediately extinguished, and the sound of a gunshot reached the yacht. "Excellency," the master said, "that is the signal from on shore. Would you like to reply?" "What signal?" he asked. The master pointed towards the island, from the side of which a single whitish plume of smoke was rising, spreading and breaking up as it mounted into the sky. "Oh, yes," the traveller said, as if waking from a dream. "Give it to me." The master offered him a ready-loaded carbine. He took it, slowly raised it, and fired into the air. 10 minutes later they were furling the sails and dropping anchor 500 yards outside a little port. The boat was already in the sea, with 4 oarsmen and a pilot. The traveller got in, but instead of sitting in the prow, which was furnished with a blue carpet, he remained standing with his arms crossed. The oarsmen waited, with their oars poised above the water, like birds drying their wings. "Go," said the traveller. The 8 oars dipped into the sea simultaneously without a single splash, and the boat, driven forward, began to glide rapidly across the water. In no time they were in a small bay formed by a natural fold in the rock. The boat grated on a fine sandy bottom, Excellency, the pilot said, climb on the shoulders of 2 of our men. They will take you ashore. The young man replied to the invitation with a gesture of complete indifference, put his legs over the side of the boat, and slid into the water, which came up to his waist. "Oh, Excellency," the pilot muttered, "you are wrong to do that. The master will tell us off." The young man continued to plough forward towards the shore, following 2 sailors who chose the best route. After 30 paces, they had landed. He shook his feet on dry land and looked around for the path that he would probably be told to follow, because it was quite dark. Just as he was turning his head, a hand rested on his shoulder, and he shuddered at hearing a voice say, "Good day, Maximilien. You are punctual. Thank you." "It's you, Count," the young man exclaimed, with a movement which could have been one of joy, grasping Monte Cristo's hand in both of his. "Yes, as you see, as punctual as you. But you are soaking wet, my dear fellow. You must get changed, as Calypso used to say to Telemachus. Come, I've got rooms all ready for you where you can forget tiredness and cold." Monte Cristo saw that Morel was looking around. He waited. Indeed, the young man was surprised that he had not heard a word from those who had brought him. He had not paid them, and yet they had left. He could even hear the plashing of the oars on the little boat taking them back to the yacht. "Ah, you're looking for your sailors," said the Count. Yes, of course, they left without me giving them anything." "Don't bother about that, Maximilien," Monte Cristo said with a laugh. "I have a deal with the Navy, so that there is no charge for passage to my island. I'm an account customer, as they say in civilized countries." Morel looked at him with astonishment. "Count," he said, "you are not the same as you were in Paris." "In what way?" "Why, here you laugh." Monte Cristo's brow clouded immediately. "You are right to recall me to myself," he said. "Seeing you again was a pleasure for me, and I forgot that every pleasure is transitory." "Oh, no, Count," Morel exclaimed, once more grasping his friend's hand with both of his. "Please do laugh. Be happy, and prove to me by your indifference that life is only a burden for those who suffer. Oh, you are generous, you are kind, you are good, my friend, and you pretend to be happy only to give me strength." "You are wrong, Morel," said Monte Cristo. "I really was happy." "Then you have forgotten me. So much the better." "What do you mean?" "Because you know, my dear friend, I say to you, as the gladiator would say to the sublime emperor on entering the arena, 'Those who are about to die salute you.'" "You are not consoled, then?" Monte Cristo asked, with a strange look. "Oh, do you really think I could be?" Morel answered, with one full of reproach. "Listen," the Count said, "and listen carefully to what I am about to say. You don't think I am some vulgar babbler, a rattle that gives out a crude and meaningless sound. When I asked you if you were consoled, I was speaking to you as a man for whom the human heart holds no secrets. Well then, Morel, let us sound the depths of your heart. Is it still that ardent impatience of pain that makes the body leap like a lion bitten by a mosquito? Is it still that raging thirst that can be sated only in the tomb? Is it that ideal notion of regret that launches the living man out of life in pursuit of death? Or is it merely the prostration of exhausted courage, the ennui that stifles the ray of hope as it tries to shine? Is it the loss of memory, bringing an impotence of tears? Oh, my friend, if it is that, if you can no longer weep, if you think your numbed heart is dead, if you have no strength left except in God, and no eyes except for heaven, then, my friend, Let us put aside words that are too narrow to contain the meanings our soul would give them. Maximilien, you are consoled. Pity yourself no longer. Count, Morel said, in a voice that was at once soft and firm. Count, listen to me, as you would listen to a man pointing towards the earth and with his eyes raised to heaven. I came here to join you so that I might die in the arms of a friend. Admittedly, there are those whom I love. I love my sister Julie. I love her husband, Emmanuel. But I need someone to open strong arms to me and smile at my last moments. My sister would burst into tears and faint. I should see her suffer, and I have suffered enough. Emmanuel would seize the weapon from my hands and fill the house with his cries. You, Count, have given me your word. You are more than a man. I should call you a god if you were not mortal. You will lead me gently and tenderly, I know, to the gates of death. My friend, said the Count, I have one lingering doubt. Will you be so weak as to pride yourself on the exhibition of your grief? No, no. I am a plain man, Morel said, offering the Count his hand. See, my pulse is not beating any faster or slower than usual. No, I feel I am at the end of the road. I shall go no further. You told me to wait and hope. Do you know what you have done, wise as you are? I have waited a month, which means I have suffered a month. I hoped. Man is such a poor and miserable creature. I hoped. For what? I don't know. Something unimaginable, absurd, senseless, a miracle, but what? God alone knows, for it was he who diluted our reason with that madness called hope. Yes, I waited. Yes, Count, I hoped. And in the past quarter of an hour, while we have been speaking, you have unwittingly broken and tortured my heart 100 times, for each of your words proved to me that I have no hope left. Oh, Count, let me rest in the sweet and voluptuous bosom of death. Morel spoke the last words with an explosion of energy that made the Count shudder. My friend, he continued, when the Count did not reply, you named October the 5th as the end of the reprieve that you asked me to accept. And my friend, this is the 5th. Morel took out his watch. It is 9 o'clock. I have 3 hours left to live. Very well, Monte Cristo replied. Come with me. Morel followed mechanically, and they were already in the grotto before Morel had realized it. He found carpets under his feet. A door opened. He was enveloped in perfumes, and a bright light dazzled him. He stopped, reluctant to go on. He was wary of being weakened by the delights around him. Monte Cristo pulled him gently forward. Is it not appropriate, he said, for us to spend the 3 hours we have left like those ancient Romans who, when they were condemned to death by Nero, their emperor and their heir, would sit at a table decked with flowers and breathe in death with the scent of heliotropes and roses? Morel smiled and said, As you wish. Death is still death. That is to say, forgetfulness, rest, the absence of life, and so the absence of pain. He sat down, and Monte Cristo took his place in front of him. They were in the wonderful dining room that we have already described, where marble statues carried baskets full of fruit and flowers on their heads. Morel had looked vaguely at all this, and had probably seen nothing of it. Let's speak man to man, he said, staring hard at the Count. Go on, the latter replied. Count, you are an encyclopedia of all human knowledge, and you strike me as someone who has come down from a more advanced and wiser world than our own. There is some truth in that, Morel, the Count said with a melancholy smile that transfigured his face. I have come from a planet called Sorrow. I believe whatever you tell me, without trying to elucidate its meaning, Count. The proof is that you told me to live, and I have lived. You told me to hope, and I almost hoped. So I shall dare to ask you, as if you had already died once before, Count, does it hurt very much? Monte Cristo looked at Morel with an infinite expression of tenderness. Yes, he said. Yes, no doubt it does hurt, if you brutally shatter the mortal envelope when it is crying out to live. If you make your flesh scream under the imperceptible teeth of a dagger, if you drive an insensitive bullet, always ready to meander on its way through your brain, which suffers from the merest jolt. Yes, indeed, you will suffer and leave life in the most horrifying way, in a desperate agony that will make you ready to think it better than rest brought at such a price. I understand, said Morel. Death has its secrets of pain and pleasure, like life. It is just a question of knowing what they are. Precisely, Maximilian. You have hit the nail on the head. Death, according to the care we take to be on good or bad terms with it, is either a friend which will rock us gently as a nursing mother, or an enemy which will savagely tear apart body and soul. One day, when our world has lived another 1,000 years, when people have mastered all the destructive forces of nature and harnessed them to the general good of mankind, and when, as you just said, men have learnt the secrets of death, then death will be as sweet and voluptuous as sleep in a lover's arms. And you, Count, if you wanted to die, would you know how to die in that way? I should. Morel reached out his hand. Now I understand, he said, why you have brought me here to this desolate island, in the midst of the ocean, to this subterranean palace, a tomb that a pharaoh would envy. It was because you love me, wasn't it, Count? You love me enough to give me one of those deaths that you spoke of just now, a death without agony, a death that will allow me to expire with Valentine's name on my lips and your hand in mine. You are right, Morel, the Count said simply. That's how I see it. Thank you. The idea that tomorrow I shall no longer suffer is like balm to my heart. Is there nothing you will miss? Monte Cristo asked. No, Morel replied. Not even me? The Count asked with deep feeling. Morel stopped, his clear eyes suddenly clouded, then shone with even greater brilliance. A large tear rolled from it and left a silver trace across his cheek. What? The Count exclaimed. There is something you will regret leaving on earth, yet you want to die? Oh, I beg you, Morel cried in a weak voice. Not a word, Count. Do not prolong my agony. The Count feared that Morel was weakening, and this belief momentarily revived the terrible doubt that had already once struck him in the Château d'If. I am engaged in giving this man back his happiness, he thought. I consider that restitution is a weight thrown back into the scales in the opposite tray from the one where I cast evil. Now suppose I am wrong, and this man is not unhappy enough to deserve happiness. Alas, what would happen to me? I, who am unable to atone for evil except by doing good. Listen to me, Morel, he said. Your grief is immense. I can see that, but you believe in God. Perhaps you do not wish to risk the salvation of your soul." Morel smiled sadly. "Count," he said, "you know that I do not exaggerate, but I swear my soul is no longer my own." "Listen, Morel," the Count said. "I have no living relative, as you know. I have grown accustomed to thinking of you as my son. Well, to save my son, I would sacrifice my life, and even more readily my fortune." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Morel, that you want to leave life because you do not know all the pleasures that life gives to the very rich. Morel, I possess nearly 100 million. You can have it. With that much money you could achieve anything you desire. Are you ambitious? Every career is open to you. Stir up the world, change it, commit any kind of folly, be a criminal if you must, but live." "Count, I have your word," the young man replied coldly. "And," he added, taking out his watch, "it is 11:30. "Could you do such a thing, Morel, in my house before my eyes?" "Then let me leave," Maximilien said, his face clouding. "Or I shall think you don't love me for myself, but for you." And he got up. "Very well, then," said Monte Cristo, his face lightening at these words. "You want it, Morel, and you are immovable. Yes, you are profoundly unhappy, and, as you said, only a miracle could cure you. Sit down and wait." The young man obeyed. Monte Cristo got up in his turn and went to open a carefully locked cupboard, the key to which he wore on a gold chain. He took out a little silver casket, magnificently sculpted and modelled with 4 arched figures at the 4 corners, like pining caryatids, shaped like women, symbols of angels reaching for heaven. He put the casket down on the table, then opened it, taking out a little gold box, the lid of which was raised by pressure on a hidden spring. This box contained a half-congealed, oily substance, its colour indefinable because of the shining gold and the sapphires, rubies and emeralds encrusting it. It was like a shimmering mass of blue, purple and gold. The Count took a small quantity of the substance on an enamelled spoon and offered it to Morel, fixing his eyes on him. Only now could it be seen that the substance was green in colour. "This is what you asked me for," he said. "This is what I promised you." "While I still have life," the young man said, taking the spoon from Monte Cristo's hands, "I thank you from the bottom of my heart." The Count took a second spoon and dipped once more into the gold box. "What are you doing, my dear friend?" Morel asked, grasping his hand. "Why, Morel," the other said with a smile, "God forgive me, but I think that I am as weary of life as you are. And while the opportunity presents itself—" "Stop!" the young man cried. "Oh, you who love and are loved, you who can trust in hope, oh, don't you do what I am about to do. For you it would be a crime. Farewell, my noble and generous friend. I shall tell Valentine all that you have done for me." And slowly, without any more hesitation than a pressure on the left hand which he was holding out to the Count, Morel swallowed, or rather savoured, the mysterious substance that Monte Cristo had offered him. Then both men fell silent. Ali, noiseless and attentive, brought tobacco and pipes, served coffee, and then vanished. Little by little the lamps paled in the hands of the marble statues holding them, and the perfume from the censers seemed less pervasive to Morel. Opposite him, Monte Cristo was watching him through the dark, and he could see nothing except the burning of the Count's eyes. The young man was overwhelmed with an immense pain. He felt the hookah fall from his hands, and the objects around him gradually lost their shape and colour. His clouded eyes seemed to see doors and curtains opening in the walls. "My friend," he said, "I feel I am dying. Thank you." He made one last effort to hold out his hand, but it fell, powerless, beside him. And now it seemed to him that Monte Cristo was smiling, no longer with that strange and terrifying smile that had several times allowed him to glimpse the mysteries of that profound soul, but with the tender compassion of a father towards the follies of his child. At the same time, the Count was growing before his eyes. His figure almost doubled in size, outlined against the red hangings. He had thrown back his black hair and stood proudly like one of those avenging angels with which the wicked are threatened on Judgment Day. Morel, beaten, overwhelmed, slumped back in his chair. A silky torpor filled his every vein. His mind was refurnished, as it were, by a change of thoughts, just like a new pattern appearing in a kaleidoscope. Lying back, panting, excited, he felt nothing more living in him apart from this dream. He seemed to be plunging directly into the vague delirium that precedes the other unknown, called death. Once again he tried to reach out to take the Count's hand, but this time his own would not even budge. He tried to utter a last goodbye, but his tongue turned heavily in his mouth, like a stone blocking the entrance to a sepulchre. Hard as he tried, he could not keep his languid eyes open, yet behind their lids there was an image that he recognized despite the darkness which he had felt had enveloped him. It was the Count, who had just opened the door. At once, an immense burst of light flooded from an adjoining room, or rather, a wonderful palace, into the room where Morel was abandoning himself to his gentle death throes. And then, on the threshold of that other chamber, between the two rooms, he saw a woman of miraculous beauty. Pale and sweetly smiling, she seemed like an angel of mercy casting out the angel of vengeance. "Is heaven already opening its gate to me?" thought the dying man. "This angel is like the one I lost." Monte Cristo pointed the young woman to the sofa where Morel was lying, and she stepped forward with her hands clasped and smiling lips. "Valentine! Valentine!" Morel cried in the depths of his soul, but his throat did not utter a sound, and, as though all his strength had been concentrated on that inner feeling, he gave a sigh and closed his eyes. Valentine dashed forward. Morel's lips moved again. "He is calling you," said the Count. "He is calling you from the depth of his sleep, the man to whom you have entrusted your fate, and from whom death tried to separate you. But fortunately I was there, and I overcame death. Valentine, from now on you must never be separated on this earth, because to rejoin you he would leap into his grave. Without me, you both would have died. I give you back to one another. May God credit me with these 2 lives that I have saved." Valentine clasped Monte Cristo by the hand, and, with an irresistible burst of joy, put it to her lips. "Yes, yes," he said. "Thank me. Oh, tell me over and over again. Never tire of telling me that I have made you happy. You do not know how much I need the certainty of that." "Oh, yes, I thank you with all my soul," Valentine said. "And if you doubt the sincerity of my thanks, ask Haydée, ask my dear sister Haydée, who has made me wait patiently since our departure from France, talking to me of you, until this happy day that has now dawned." "Do you love Haydée?" Monte Cristo asked, with ill-disguised emotion. "Oh, yes, with all my heart." "Then, Valentine, listen to me," said the Count. "I have a favour to beg of you." "Of me? Good heavens, am I fortunate enough for that?" You called Haidee your sister. Let her be your sister indeed, Valentine. Give her everything that you think you owe to me. Protect her, you and Morel, because—" and here the Count's voice was almost stifled in his throat, "because from now on she will be alone in the world." "Alone in the world?" repeated a voice from behind the place where the Count was standing. "Why?" Monte Cristo turned and saw Haidee, pale and ice-cold, giving him a look of utter disbelief. "Because tomorrow, my child, you will be free," he replied, "because you will resume your proper place in the world, and because I do not want my fate to cloud your own. You are the daughter of a prince. I am restoring your father's wealth and your father's name to you." Haidee's face was drained of colour. She opened her translucent hands like a virgin recommending her soul to God, and said in a voice harsh with tears, "So, my lord, you are leaving me?" "Haidee, Haidee, you are young and beautiful. Forget even my name, and be happy." "Very well," said Haidee. "Your orders will be carried out, my lord. I shall forget even your name, and I shall be happy." And she took a pace backwards to leave the room. "Oh, my God!" cried Valentine, who was supporting Morel's numbed head on her shoulder. "Can't you see how pale she is? Don't you realize what she is suffering?" Haidee addressed her with a heart-rending expression on her face. "How do you expect him to understand me, my sister? He is my master, and I his slave. He has the right to see nothing." The Count shuddered at the tone of this voice, which awoke the deepest fibres of his being. His eyes met those of the young woman, and could not bear to look into them. My God, he said, "can what you hinted to me be true? Haidee, would you be happy then not to leave me?" "I am young," she answered softly. "I love life, which you have always made so pleasant for me. I should be sorry to die." "Do you mean that if I were to leave you, Haidee—" "Yes, my lord, I should die." "Do you love me, then?" "Oh, Valentine, he asks if I love him. Tell him, do you love Maximilien?" The Count felt his breast swell and his heart fill. He opened his arms, and Haidee threw herself into them with a cry. Oh, yes, I love you," she said. "I love you as one loves a father, a brother, a husband. I love you as one loves life and loves God, for you are to me the most beautiful, the best and greatest of created beings." "Let it be as you will, my sweet angel," said the Count. "God, who roused me against my enemies and gave me victory, God, I can see, does not wish my victory to end with that regret. I wish to punish myself, but God wants to pardon me. So love me, Haidee. Who knows? Perhaps your love will make me forget what I have to forget." "What are you saying, my lord?" the young woman asked. "I am saying that a word from you, Haidee, enlightened me more than 20 years of sage wisdom. I have only you left in the world, Haidee. It is through you that I am attached to life, through you that I can suffer, and through you I can be happy." "Do you hear that, Valentine?" Haidee cried. "He says that through me he can suffer. Through me, when I would give my life for him." The Count thought for a moment. "Have I understood the truth? Oh, God, what matter? Reward or punishment, I accept my fate. Come, Haidee, come." And putting his arm round the young woman's waist, he pressed Valentine's hand and disappeared. About an hour passed, in which, breathing heavily and staring, unable to speak, Valentine remained by Morel's side. Finally she felt his heart beat. A barely perceptible breath passed his lips, and the young man's whole body was shaken by that slight shudder which indicates returning life. Finally his eyes opened, though at first they stared wildly. Then sight returned, sharp and true, and with it feeling, and with feeling, pain. "Oh!" he wailed in a desperate voice. "I'm still alive! The Count deceived me!" And his hand reached for a knife on the table. "My friend," said Valentine with her irresistible smile, "wake up and look towards me." Morel gave a great cry, and delirious, full of doubt, dazzled as though by some celestial vision, he fell on both knees. The next day, with the first rays of sunlight, Morel and Valentine were walking arm in arm on the shore, Valentine telling Morel how Monte Cristo had appeared in her room, how he had revealed everything to her, how he had made her unveil the criminal, and finally how he had miraculously saved her from death, while letting everyone believe that she was dead. They had found the door to the grotto open and had gone out. The last stars were still shining in the blue of the morning sky, and, in the half-light of a cluster of rocks, Morel saw a man waiting for a sign to come over to them. He pointed him out to Valentine. "Oh, that's Jacopo," she said, motioning to him to join them, "the captain of the yacht." "Do you have something to tell us?" Morel asked. "I have this letter to give you on behalf of the Count." "From the Count?" the two young people exclaimed in unison. "Yes, read it." Morel opened the letter and read, "My dear Maximilien, there is a felucca lying at anchor for you. Jacopo will take you to Leghorn, where Monsieur Nortier is awaiting his granddaughter, whom he wishes to bless before she follows you to the altar. Everything that is in this grotto, my friend, my house in the Champs-Élysées and my little country house in Les Tréport, are a wedding present from Edmond Dantès to the son of his master, Morel. Mademoiselle de Villefort must have half of it, because I beg her to give the poor people of Paris whatever money she has coming to her from her father, who has become mad, and her brother, who died last September with her stepmother. Tell the angel who will watch over your life, Morel, to pray sometimes for a man who, like Satan, momentarily thought himself the equal of God, and who, with all the humility of a Christian, came to realize that in God's hands alone resides supreme power and infinite wisdom. These prayers may perhaps ease the remorse that he takes with him in the depth of his heart. As for you, Morel, this is the whole secret of my behaviour towards you. There is neither happiness nor misfortune in this world. There is merely the comparison between one state and another, nothing more. Only someone who has suffered the deepest misfortune is capable of experiencing the heights of felicity. Maximilien, you must needs have wished to die, to know how good it is to live. So, do live and be happy, children dear to my heart, and never forget that, until the day when God deigns to unveil the future to mankind, all human wisdom is contained in these two words: wait and hope. Your friend, Edmond Dantès, Count of Monte Cristo. While he was reading this letter, which informed her of her father's madness and the death of her brother, neither of which she had known until then, Valentine went pale and gave a painful sigh. Tears, no less touching for being silent, ran down her cheeks. She had purchased her happiness at a high price. Morel looked around him anxiously. "But the Count really is being too generous," he said. "Valentine will be happy with my modest fortune. Where is the Count, my friend? Take me to him." Jacopo pointed to the horizon. "Why, what do you mean?" Valentine asked. "Where is the Count? Where is Haydée?" "Look," said Jacopo. The two young people looked in the direction towards which the sailor was pointing, and, on the dark blue line on the horizon that separated the sky from the Mediterranean, they saw a white sail, as large as a gull's wing. "He is gone," cried Morel. "Gone! Farewell, my friend, my father." "Yes, he is gone," Valentine muttered. "Farewell, my friend. Farewell, my sister." "Who knows if we shall ever see them again?" Morel said, wiping away a tear. "My dearest," said Valentine, "has the Count not just told us that all human wisdom was contained in these 2 words? Wait and hope." The end. And that, yes, is the end of The Count of Monte Cristo. We did it! Woohoo! We finished it. Yeah. So, I have a problem with the fact that the Count's decided to, or rather Haidee has decided that she wants to be with the Count. Especially the whole... No, I wasn't expecting that ending either. Especially the whole, I love you like a brother, a father, a lover. It's like, this feels a bit incestuous. Also, you're his slave. This is... don't like it. Don't like it. And she's what, like 18? And he's what, 40? Or something? It just feels a little bit odd. Not great. But yeah, we survived. We did it. I don't know. The ending feels a bit anticlimactic, really. Kind of predictable. But I suppose it's all kind of going to that conclusion anyway. And don't get me wrong, I'm very happy for Maximilien and Valentine. They're good eggs, they seem. So that's good. And I do like the fact that Danglars was put through the best sassy bits of dialogue in the whole thing, really. Pretty great. Problematic. Exactly, yeah. Doesn't feel great. So, yeah. Also doesn't feel great because they had that whole thing with Mercedes and Edmund, whereas Mercedes was like, oh, I look way older than I actually am because grief has made me look old, and so I can't be with you. And now he's gone, cool, all right, well, I'll just hook up with an 18-year-old then. No. But, you know, she seemed to want to be with him, so I guess that's okay. It's not okay. None of it's okay. She sees him as a father figure. It's not okay. I don't like it. But that's that done. We did it. Thank you, everyone who has stuck with the book. A bit sketch. Yeah. It's a mild way of putting it. Yeah, thank you everyone who has stuck through from the beginning of this book to the end. This has taken us... Hang on, let's do some calculations here. This has taken us 8 months. 8 months of streams to get through. But we did it. And I'm very glad we did, because I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good book and an excellent story. And just lots happening. There's no one in this book making sound relationship decisions. Well, apart from Valentine and Maximilien, they seem fairly like decent to each other. Like she seemed pretty, you know, pretty good to begin with at going like, yeah, I do kind of like you, but also I can't really marry you, so like she seemed fairly strong. But he kept trying to kill himself. Well, yes, there was that, but then he did do that after she had died. So it's kind of like, but yeah, still not a particularly sensible decision. True. Maybe not the most stable. Yeah, I don't think anyone's stable in this. I'm trying to think if anyone has a decent relationship in this. No, they don't. You've got V4, his wife is a poisoner. Had an affair with Madame Danglars, who hates her husband. So, yeah. Yeah, and Mercedes was married to someone who was just an awful person, really. who pursued her and then just went, yeah, I'm marrying you. Yeah, it's not great, is it? It's not great. But, you know, this is where that you only therapy gift comes in useful. Yeah, if they just talked about their problems, then it would be fine. Although, quite frankly, problem of being chucked in prison for a number of years, that's yeah, unjustly, that's kind of a bit more than a talking through therapy kind of problem, really. I can kind of understand why he wanted revenge. Couldn't be a good romantic drama without a decent level of oof. Precisely. Nice bit of French drama in there. So yeah, we're done. It's going to feel very weird when I actually have to decide what to read now. I can't just go, let's just do the next bit of Monte Cristo. I am going to be very glad when I open a book and it A, doesn't have many pages, and B, doesn't have Roman numerals that go up to 117, because despite the fact that apparently I can read Roman numerals, it takes my brain a heck of a long time to actually translate them to numbers. So yeah, I'll be glad about not having to deal with that anymore. But yes, thank you all so much. Make a list of books to read, put a list on dartboard, throw a dart. It's tempting. I have a long list of things I could read, but the next novel you will be treated to, apart from, well, Sam will finish Thingamajig, War of the Worlds, soon, and then we will have the delight that is Dracula for spooky season, so be excited for that. That'll be fun. But until then, I don't think I'm going to raid anyone, because I'm tired, and I think Sam is tired also. So, spinny wheel, best way to choose things, true, but then you have to make a spinny wheel. Sounds effort. I suppose they're probably online ones. But, yeah, we're not going to raid anyone tonight, I don't think. Dracula's going to be fun. Oh, it's going to be great. Spooky season coming up. Spooky, scary Dracula. And, yeah, we will see you back, hopefully, on, unless anything else happens, on Saturday with more War of the Worlds. Excuse me. And yeah, until then, be good people, take care of yourselves and everyone around you, and yeah, have a good rest of the week, and we shall see you again soon. Good night, goodbye.